What's up, guys? Thanks for joining us today on the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. We're going to get into a lesson that you can use for your Jiu-Jitsu. It's basically, if you guys have been following my emails, it's basically one of these lessons where it's a lesson that I either wish I knew sooner when I was younger and getting into Jiu-Jitsu. And also, a lot of times when I say getting into Jiu-Jitsu, you have to remember that I became an adult on the mats as well. So like a lot of these lessons are kind of intertwined with life because of the fact that like I spent so much of my life on the mat. But it's a lesson that was useful on and off the mats. And so we'll get into this, and hopefully this is useful to you, your training, useful to your life off the mat, your own philosophy and things like that. And again, this has been a useful one to me. So before we get into it, thanks to our sponsors for helping make this thing happen. Charlotte's Web. If you guys haven't checked it out yet, recently when I was doing some emails, some people sent me a message and they said, hey, I'm worried about pissing hot, right? So to speak, where they're worried about THC is showing up in their the words. Sometimes they're tough for Chewy. So some of the people were worried about pissing hot because they have drug tests and stuff like that. And so I directed them to a new product that Charlotte's Web has out. So one of the things that everybody knows about with CBD is that it's unregulated and it's you don't know what's in that bottle sometimes. And very few companies third-party test to certify what's in there. So recently, Charlotte's Web came out with a product. They call it it's the Daily Sports Edge. Mm-hmm. And it's one of their new products. And it has what's called an NSF certified sport sort of like seal on it. Now, for you guys to understand maybe why that's significant, USADA, right? The one that like tests UFC and all these different organizations that will, come and like make, people like you have all those crazy stories of like Chael Sonnen or someone having the USADA rep show up and start like, making them pee in a back closet or something, those guys, the supplements that have that NSF certified sport are basically approved by USADA. USADA recognizes them as safe to use with their testing protocols, right? So again, I don't know what your testing protocols are, but like USADA's pretty darn stringent with theirs. And so if someone was to take the Daily Sports Edge, they would be backed by that certification that's on there, that third-party certification. And, there's other people that acknowledge that as well, like the Major League Baseball and everything else. So if you're one of those people that wants to use Charlotte's Web, wants to use CBD products, you've been interested in them a while, but you can't use them because of testing, then that would be the product I would direct you to look into because of that seal of approval. It is pretty significant because of what's involved with it. So again, check it out. If you guys want to get that, you can check it out their website at charlottesweb.com. Just make sure to use promo code Jiu-Jitsu20 and you'll get 20% off that offer. And I think I know that the last time we did a Charlotte's Web thing, we did around Black Friday. I'll extend that out just a little bit. So if you guys order something from Charlotte's Web using our promo code Jiu-Jitsu20, afterwards, send me an email or a DM if you're on Instagram, whichever one, with your receipt. You don't have to have your address on it. You can just have your order number and stuff. Send me an email address with your receipt, and I will send you a link to a list of videos that I have. It's like a 23 video bonus that I give away. You can check it out and you can enjoy it. So that's something to look into. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Matt at Epic Roll, for helping make this podcast happen. If you guys have never checked out Matt's website, I encourage you to do so. He's got some sweet jiu-jitsu merch and t-shirts and gear and everything else. Recently, he just released what I'm going to have to get one, is the wrist lock shirt. So if you guys have looked at any of my videos or seen a picture where I had like the triangle choke, the Kimura shirt, where basically it's like just the words and it's like a definition under it. He just came out with a wrist lock one. And as you guys know, I'm a dirty wrist locker. I'll try to wrist lock you if I get the chance. And I will. I have no qualms about it. If you're a white belt, no problem. I'll wrist lock you too, because I'll do it. Teenagers, kids, don't care. I'll wrist lock everybody.
Babies, infants. I brought my son in. Chewy's like, Oliver, let me show you something. Wrist lock. No, I'm kidding. That didn't happen.
No,
but he would. I wouldn't put it past him.
I would. If I roll with Oliver, like, how old is Oliver?
He's 7.
He's old enough to be wrist locked,
That's
so
right.
that's the way it works.
No one is safe.
I bet as a kid though, he's probably Gumby, right? He's probably all flexible and stuff. Um,
He's got
if
some
you guys
mobility.
if you ever put someone in a gooseneck, sometimes they can touch their forearm. But anyway, if you guys want to check out some of his stuff, I encourage you to look it up and see if anything strikes your fancy. I like a lot of his shirts. I'm wearing one right now. I wear one pretty regularly because they're comfortable, and so they make their way into my uniform. Like if you guys, I don't know if anybody else does this. I have any coaches or whatever. I have a uniform that is essentially jeans in the wintertime or jogging pants, mostly jeans. And then in the summertime, it's like shorts. And then it's a jiu-jitsu shirt. And I just basically have a drawer, multiple drawers full of my jiu-jitsu shirts and then just different jiu-jitsu shirts, right? Like, and Matt's is one that finds its way onto my body every single week as part of my daily jiu-jitsu uniform. So again, check them out at epicrollbjj.com. The promo code for it is jiu-jitsu for 15% off. And you save yourself some money, get some cool stuff. Also, guys, if you have never checked out Manscaped and you're a man and you have a beard or you've got hair on your body somewhere that you would like to trim, I encourage you to check their website out and see if you'd be interested in anything. We originally brung Manscaped on as a sponsor because I tried their trimmer. They were making their initial big marketing push that you may have seen kind of happen over the last couple of years. They contacted us. I was like, I don't know, man. Don't really want to talk about shaving your body hair. But they sent me the trimmer. I was like, it's a pretty damn good trimmer. It's got a nice little light, which doesn't seem significant. But then when you're trimming it, it really helps illuminate those little hairs so you can get all of them. If you've ever been like trimming your chest or your shoulders or other places, and you find that you have a couple stray hairs, that little light helps show you those stray hairs. Also, it's waterproof, which is really nice. The trimmer is like, I mean, that's kind of a cool thing. Like, because before, like, I would have to like trim. And again, maybe every guy maybe understands this. In wives, maybe you understand this too. If you've ever had to like have a guy trim his beard or trim his body hair, and they have to do that, like, over top of like an area where it can collect on the floor or something, right? Where basically hair just goes everywhere. So like now I just take my cordless trimmer that's waterproof and I can go into the shower and trim it. And it's much easier to deal with because then it all just clumps up there at the bottom and I can collect it and throw it away. And my wife is very happy about that because now we don't have stray hairs all over the sink, which is a problem, right? So again, if you want to check out their trimmer or any of their products, I also really like their deodorants and soaps and everything else. Everything's pretty solid. Even their underwear is comfortable. So check them out. So you can check them out at manscaped.com. The promo code for it, if you want to save some money, is Jiu-Jitsu20. That'll give you 20% off the order and you'll get free shipping. So that's a pretty good deal because again, like, sometimes you look at something, you're like, I want to get this product. And then there's going to be taxes and shipping on top of it. Well, I can't do anything for the taxes because that goes to Uncle Sam if you're in the US, right? And then the shipping though is not going to charge anything, and you'll get 20% off the price there. So good deal. Check it out at manscaped.com. Also, if you guys want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by scurrying on over to the Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. When you guys go there and you subscribe as a member, you will get access to 2 free bonuses along with the exclusive content that we release every month. And has been released for every month for several years. So you'll have plenty of stuff to keep you entertained. But those 2 free bonuses are pretty good. My favorite out of the 2 free bonuses, to be honest with you, like I did a seminar and the seminar is cool, but it's like more jiu-jitsu techniques. My favorite bonus is actually the bonus that Eugene put together, which is a warm-up routine that we specifically put together for jiu-jitsu people. So I sat down with Eugene. I was like, hey, Eugene, I need a 20-minute warm-up routine for this camp that I'm doing. And of course, in Eugene fashion, he's like, oh man, there's so many different things I can do. And he starts thinking about every single muscle in the body and how it all interconnects. And, he came to me with like this 3-hour long stretching. So I was like, bro, 20 minutes. We got to make this 20 minutes. And so he basically plucked out the more important ones, put them together in a 20-minute routine that basically in the video, you will see him going through, teaching other people in the group how to do. And then you can follow along at home. Now, what's cool about this is each one of those exercises and stretches and movements is focused on an area in particular that is affected by jiu-jitsu. So jiu-jitsu is a very specific type of engaging sport that requires certain muscle groups. And anytime we continuously do something, our body will adapt to that stimulus. So that's why if you look at jiu-jitsu practitioners, we have rounded shoulders a lot of times. It's not that our body wants to have bad posture. It's that we're putting ourselves in a position where having rounded shoulders is actually advantageous, because it's how we block elbow or underhooks, and it's how we move around on the mat more efficiently by rounding our back. Now, that's fine for our sport, but we've got to do something off the mats to help sort of balance that out a little bit. And again, this little warm-up routine could be very instrumental in doing that. And it's very short, so it's not like you have to devote an hour to 2 hours a day doing it. It's very short, 20 minutes. Once you get that thing in your head and you get the routine down, then you can just off the top, you'll know exactly what to do. So anyway, check that out. It can be super helpful. And you get that bonus by joining the Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And guys, last but not least, if you would like to join my Chew Crew email list and get access to 3 free Jiu-Jitsu ebooks that could help your game, either with drilling, designing a game plan for your next competition, or understanding how to study Jiu-Jitsu at home, then join the email list. You'll get access to all 3 of those ebooks, and you'll get my daily email that I send out. And again, you can unsubscribe at any time, and you can join up by going to my website at chewjitsu.net/join. Chewjitsu, CHEWJITSU. I'm terrible today with words. JITSU.net/JOIN. Join. So guys, with that said, let's jump into this podcast. This is a lesson that I think is super important. If you guys follow me on social media, you probably saw this pop up a little bit. And so today we'll go a little deeper into it. But the idea is basically chase abilities, not belts. Chase developments, not destinations. Now, originally that idea of chasing abilities, not belts, one of the black belts at our gym said it. Maybe he heard it somewhere else. But I remember one of our black belts, he was sitting there. And well, he was actually a brown belt at the time. And one of these guys came up to him. They said, "Hey, Tony, what are you going to do when you get your black belt? Like, you know what I mean? Or how, when do you get your black belt?" I think that's what they asked him. They asked him, "When are you going to get your black belt?" And he's like, "I don't know, man." He's like, "I chase techniques. I don't chase belts." And I was like, "Oh, that's so like, yeah, that's the way to do it." And for me, I never really had an issue with belts. I had other issues. But let's jump into this. So here's an idea. We'll start this off. And again, we do this in other areas of our lives. And so that's why we're going to kind of do this thing where we're going to talk a little bit about life and string it into jiu-jitsu. So to share with you guys a funny story. When I was a kid, I remember there was a very vivid memory that I have where I was in the grocery store, the department store with my grandfather. So my grandpa, I lived with him for several years when I was a kid, when my mom was kind of getting herself together as she was dealing with alcoholism. And so I lived with my grandpa for several years. And I remember there was this one time, I don't know how old I was. I imagine somewhere around like 7 or something, where we were in a store. I think I was a little younger. I think it was like maybe like 5 or 6. So I was in the store though, and I'm with my grandfather, and there was this really cool box set of G.I. Joes. So it had like the base, the G.I. Joes, a helicopter. It was like this whole thing, right? So again, my little mind is just going through like what this could be. So I plead with my grandfather with all the passion my little heart could muster. And I told him, I said, "Grandpa, if you get me this set of toys, I'll never want anything ever again. I'll never want another toy. I'll just want this one. This is the best thing ever." And he was like, he looked at me, you know, I'm sure he knew I was full of shit. Like, he's like, okay. So he grinned. And, you know, after I pleaded with him a little bit, he went ahead and bought it. A few weeks later, I'm sitting around and there was like a new toy on TV or something like that. And I started talking to him about it. And he was like, he asked me, he's like, "Oh, I thought you didn't want any more toys after those G.I. Joes I bought you." And, you know, as a kid, I'm like, "Oh," you know, so he kind of knew. And I think this was around the same time that he started to put me to work for anything that I wanted. So basically my grandfather, there was a rule, basically, if I wanted something, I had to work for it. So like, if I wanted something, it was like, okay, well, like I have to go cut the grass on all the yards, and I have to clean the house, or I have to do this, I have to do that. I have to go work for something. Or I remember one time he bought me a video game, but in return, I had to go shovel driveways for all the older people in the neighborhood. And so I was just like shoveling stuff, you know, like, and then sometimes he would just make me shovel stuff and he wouldn't give me anything. I remember one year I shoveled driveways. And I remember, he said I wouldn't get any money for it, but I had to do it anyway. I was like, okay. And I was shoveling it, and like older people were trying to give me $1 here, $1 there. And I got back and I was all happy. And he was like, you go take that money back. That's not why we're doing it. I was like, damn it. But
That's
anyway,
awesome, dude.
yeah, I know. But it's
I
like, I
love
didn't,
it.
I didn't appreciate it when I was younger. Right now, I know that the GI Joes have nothing to do with jiu-jitsu or most people's lives, but that in itself is kind of how we a lot of times chase things. We put ourselves and we chase after this in destination point, expecting something magical to be there. And then once we get there, it's like, oh, something next, right? You can exchange the achievements with whatever. It could be belts, it could be medals, it could be whatever. This is, I think, why a lot of times people experience the blue belt blues, or you could call it maybe fulfillment fatigue, where you basically get fatigued after you achieve something. You were expecting this thing to be great, and it wasn't there, once you get it. It's like basically you fixate on the goal, expecting that goal to fill some void and to be some sort of magical experience. Then you reach it and it's business as usual. For me in jiu-jitsu, the lesson came because I never really chased belts. I've said that. I chased gold medals. I was always after gold medals, and I was always chasing wins, like whether it was in the gym or on the competition. I was always trying to win. And it was one of those things where, like, as you get older and you get more and more into it, you like, well, I won my first tournament, so then I wanted to win another. I remember winning gold at regionals in high school at wrestling, and so I wanted to win state. By the way, I didn't win state. And then I remember in jiu-jitsu, as an example, I remember winning like nogi pans one year. Pretty big deal. I was like, okay, one nogi pan's great. Well, maybe I can do it again in a different weight class, like which I did, right? It's like, so then you get into these other things, and each gold medal that I had that I ever won would always find its way into my gym bag after I was done. Then I would, go eat some big massive meal to cheat, and then like the next week there would almost a lot of times be this depression that would follow after the goal was achieved, and then it would be back to training as usual. No pot of gold at the end of my sweaty joint lock rainbow, right? That was just it. And so, and this is something kind of like important, like in business too. So any of you guys that are business owners or people that are like climbing and trying to do better, right? It's true for this too, right? Like early on in business, I set these goals for like salary numbers, like how much money I wanted to make, along with how many students I wanted to have, and everything else. And in my bearded noggin, I thought that if I just achieved those numbers, everything would be good, right? Everything would just somehow be better. Everything would be good. I'd be happy. I'd be so satisfied with it. I'd be good. And then eventually the business blew past those numbers, both, and everything. And then it was, again, just like the GI Joes, just like the gold medals. It was like, oh, I'm just, what else am I going to do now? And so the idea here is that goals themselves aren't bad. They're not bad at all, because they're useful. Because a lot of times it's when we have those goals in place, we force ourselves to work harder, exercise more discipline, and we have to develop new skills. I know for me, like a lot of times the different goals that I put in place forced me to develop new skills that improved my life and made me better, stronger, and more capable person in whatever I was doing. And it's these things that honestly have made my life better. It's not the actual thing that I achieved. It was, who I became in order to achieve it. And so in my bearded opinion, the magic isn't in the things you achieve, but the person you become in order to achieve them. I think that's really the important part. And again, it's easy to get lost in this. And this particular lesson will not make sense to you unless you achieve something that is very meaningful to you. A lot of times, like if you haven't achieved anything, you're desperate just to achieve something. But once you've achieved something that was a really big goal that seemed maybe out of reach, and you've achieved that goal, and you're like, you experience a certain depression, a letdown from the goal, because you're like, well, what now? Like this was supposed to be better. This was supposed to be different, but I'm the same person, right? You're the same person. You're not the same person because you had to become a different person, but ultimately we still kind of feel the same.
Yeah. You're this, you are like, you're still Chewy. I'm still Eugene, but yes, you're maybe an evolved or a better version of yourself, but you're still yourself at the core.
Yeah. And so I think that's the issue, because I think that a lot of times, like blue belt blues is a great example. You get your blue belt, you were expecting something to change. Nothing's different. It's just business as usual.
Yeah.
You win a competition, business as usual. I remember like, you know, I remember even like when Jess and I, when we bought the house, not that a house is that big of a deal, but I was like, man, I really want to find a place with land that's close to the city, like, which we
Yep.
found. It's hard to do. It took us like 2.5 years to get it. And then you get there, you're like, okay, it's house. What next? Like, we got to do stuff. I mean, whatever. I mean, there's nothing about the goals there that it's going to make anything different. Now, when you think about like for instance, like let's just go to the house thing as an example.
Mm-hmm.
We basically cleared out all our debt. We got really really tight with our money on purpose. We saved up a crap ton of money to get ready for it because we wanted to have lots of money to like put down on it and potentially pay it off sooner and everything else. And so we did all these things, and so we improved all the things that we were doing in order to get there, right? And like we even had a plan in place that was like, she doesn't work, she works from home, she works less hours and all these different things because that's just what we wanted to do. And so we had this plan in place, and so we achieved it, and all those things are good, right? But again, those are the things that are really important. The actual thing is just, it's a thing. And again, like when you become a belt in jiu-jitsu, it's not about the belt, the rank or whatever. It's what that represents and the skills that you had to develop in order to be that thing. That's what's important. Or even the training habits you developed, the discipline you've developed in order to do that. Because again, let's say if you're listening to this and you're not a white belt, you're a blue belt up to black belt, you have done something that most people will never do. I mean, it's just one of those things. We all know that most white belts never make it to blue belt. And it's not because teachers are awful. It's not because jiu-jitsu is just poorly like structured and everything else. I know people use those excuses, but it comes down to like a lot of people, they want to do something. And then like once they get into something, it's really difficult. And then it becomes like, well, it's really difficult. Can you stick with it? And I know some people will then say, well, no, because like, when I trained, I went to the gym and I got injured. Da, da, da. I understand that's a difficulty, isn't it? Yep. The difficulties can come in a myriad of different ways. Your difficulty versus someone else's difficulty is different, right? But ultimately it was difficult. And then you have to dig in and say, do I really want this? And a lot of people, for the most part, they just don't. And I don't, and by the way, I don't mean that in a negative way, because everybody's got their own struggles. There's different things that we all struggle with personally. And so what's easy for one person is very difficult for another. But at the same time, if you came in and it was difficult and you stuck with it anyway, and you got your blue belt or any belt beyond that, you have then done something that most people cannot do because they don't have the drive, or they did not practice the discipline in order to develop the habits to reach that. And that's something to be proud of.
Yeah, it's the intrinsic versus extrinsic kind of, I don't want to say even goals, but like usually these like the belt, that's kind of extrinsic.
Yep.
The gold medal, that's extrinsic. But the process of getting there, the process of doing it, so we like to say grind, grinding, or just kind of getting in there day in, day out. That's intrinsic. Like that's your own, like that development of achieving that blue belt, like what you have to go through for that is what creates that, that person, what creates that drive, I guess, and what allows you to kind of transition to, well, I got this blue belt, maybe even your extrinsic motivation could be the start, and that's what gets you there. But then you have to find that intrinsic motivation afterwards. Like for me, I was very excited to get my blue belt. I was very excited, and but then you're like, all right, what now? Well, you got to figure out, well, I'm this blue belt. Like what's my purpose? Like it's a belt now at this point. What's my internal catapult to keep going? Like, why do I want to keep going to jiu-jitsu if all I wanted was to get this gold medal or get this blue belt? Then what is it afterwards? Well, and you get that kind of letdown in some ways, like you talked about. You get a little letdown of like, I had that a little bit of black belt, honestly. I was waiting on black belt for so long. It's not waiting, but like I was like, I don't want to say anticipating it, but I knew it was coming, right?
Sure.
I didn't know when, but I knew it was coming. And I was like, well, what the hell am I have this black belt? Oh my God. And then you get and you're like, I've got this black belt. Show up the next time with a black belt on. Oh, you're a black belt. Cool. Get your ass to work. Let's go. Let's train. So I don't know, man. You still kind of get it sometimes, but like, after a while, it's just kind of what you do. Like jiu-jitsu is just something you do. It's just part of your routine. And for me, it was kind of how it made me feel afterwards, even like being sore, like we had, training yesterday and today, I'm like, my body's kind of achy getting out of bed. I kind of like that a little bit. Kind of like feeling that, like I did something.
Yeah. Have you ever read The Alchemist?
Yes.
So The Alchemist, a lot of times I think about this. There's when he's in the part of the story where I forgot what kind of, he wants to go to Egypt to see the pyramids. And I think he's in like Algeria or whatever. And he's talking to the shop owner and he's like, hey, come to see the pyramids with me. And the guy was like, no, I don't want to. He's like, but you want to see them, right? He's like, well, yeah. But he's like, I don't want the dream to be gone.
Yeah.
And so like a lot of times, like when and that's the thing, it's the depressing side of achieving your goals where, once you get there, it's like, well, I did, especially if it's a big goal, like you're like, oh, I did that thing that I was doing. Well, what now? It's not magical anymore. You know what I mean? The magic's been stolen from it because you achieved it. Now you got to find something else. And it's both, it's a beautiful thing and a depressing thing in some ways. And so, so you just go back to doing it. Now, there is one thing. I was reading a book recently, and they were talking about a study where there's a theory, right? So this is not fact or anything, but there's a theory that these people had where that children today are struggling more and more with finding intrinsic motivations and drives. And this has been going on gradually for a while because of the fact that children are not allowed to play out in the open with other children. So basically the theory is most kids today are forced to, like, the way that they interact with other kids a lot of times is through games that are constructed by adults. So for instance, if they get their parents put them into a bazillion sports. So the kids are doing like a million things over and over again. That kid's always playing in a environment with adults watching them the whole time. If kids play a video game with their friends, they're now playing a video game constructed by adults with adult rules, right? Today, the kids don't go outside with each other because, one, everybody's afraid that their kids are going to get snatched up, even though statistically speaking, you're better off now than when we were kids, statistically speaking, right? No, not probably. Statistically speaking, if a kid was to go outside, he's safer now than when he was when we were kids. I mean, it's not like it's just data. It's consistently getting better. Maybe 2020 was different. I don't know. But like up until the last several years, it's been consistently this way. But because the news pops up everywhere, we're like afraid. And so, and like you think about that, like, parents could get in trouble for maybe letting their kid like go walk by themselves or something. Anyway, and then the idea is that like when we were younger, you would go do stuff with kids and other kids, and you would just go do it because you wanted to do it. You guys would just figure out stuff, make up your own rules, and you would just do things because you wanted to do them. And so you had an intrinsic drive to do these things, not because your parents were telling you to, not because you were getting a gold medal, but because you were just interacting with your environment and you found something that was fun to do that you wanted to do. Right. And so that's kind of one of their theories about it, is that because we live in a world where everything is so structured, there's always these goals and these points that we're trying to achieve, that we sometimes have trouble just learning to play and finding a love for that play. And by play, I don't mean like playing around in the game fashion. I just mean like playing around. Like maybe you're like working with like some sort of theory on like mathematics or something, and you're just playing around with the theory, or if you go into jiu-jitsu, instead of like, I'm trying to win this role, I'm just trying to play around with this new technique I'm working on. Yeah. Instead of doing that, it's always like, I'm trying to win, and there's win and lose. There's always this sort of like thing going on, and it's a theory. I have no idea whether or not that's actually true or if it'll stay true, but at least on some level it makes sense, because it's like, one of those things where like, okay, if you can't do something just because you want to do it, if you never find that ability to do that, like basically if you never find that feeling of what it's like to do something that you enjoy doing and to continue doing it, then that's a problem. Because it's like, I feel like in our lives, we try to find those things where like, instead of chasing an achievement that you think you should want because other people like it, you as an adult, or as a kid, as an adult, you start to search around for different things that you enjoy doing and that maybe have some positive end result, but you just enjoy doing them, and that's why you do them. And if you can find those things and there's a desirable end result that you want, if you can find those two things together, it's perfect. It's like, for instance, like when I rolled in jiu-jitsu and did wrestling, from the moment I did it, I loved it. I mean, even when I was having a bad day, I still loved it. And I wanted to do it all the time. And I've almost, aside from like, I can think of one day on the mats where I like almost thought about, I don't want to do this anymore. One day.
Mm.
And that was just because my coach was an asshole to me. Otherwise, it was like, even on my worst days, even on days I got injured, there was never a moment where I was like, you know what? I don't think I want to do this anymore. I might need a day off or something because I'm tired and beat up, but it's like, I always like being there. And so like, again, it's very easy for me to train, because I because of that. And so, it's one of those things where I was able to find something that I had an intrinsic drive for and I continue to do. And again, I think that sometimes they'll listen to other people have these different achievements and they'll try to force themselves. This is kind of off topic now, but they'll see someone else and see the achievements that they've made. And they'll start to want to chase that achievement because they're like, well, that looks really cool. I want that. And this is not necessarily a bad thing because that's how humans work, right? But then they either force themselves to do it, they don't enjoy it, or they don't enjoy it, and then they feel guilty about it because they're like, well, I'm not disciplined enough. I'm not, no, you just probably just isn't for you. If you want to do it, it's fine, but like, it may not be your thing. Just like for me, like there's lots of things that aren't my thing. And it's not that I lack discipline or whatever, just those aren't my things. And it would be silly to try to force myself to do something I find absolutely intolerable if I don't have to. Right. And so it's okay. And again, I guess you could even string that back to chasing a destination instead of like chasing the development that's going on. Do you absolutely abhor the whole idea of this development in this particular area? Because if you do, it's probably not your thing. Like if going to jiu-jitsu is like one of the worst things you can, it just bothers you so much. And you're like, I hate doing this. You shouldn't do it. I mean, I find it like the most enjoyable thing in the world, but if you hate it, you shouldn't do it. And you shouldn't force it.
I think sometimes you may hate it because it brings up insecurities or anxiety in you. Like some people may not like coming because every time they walk those doors, they get anxious or it builds up stress in them. And I think that's a reason to do it. I think that's why you should. I think sometimes you should do things that you feel are maybe not. And I'm not saying like, I don't know.
Well, let's make this distinction. If you, let's say jiu-jitsu can kick up anxiety and all that stuff, right? Yes, of course it can.
Absolutely.
But once you're training, like when you're done, do you enjoy yourself? If the answer is yes, then it's fine. You like that, okay? I mean, again, things can be difficult in the thick of the difficulty sometimes. Like it's like, but as long as like you do enjoy it, like when you're completed with, you're like, I actually like this. This was a lot of fun, or I'm glad I did this today. That's what you should go. That's what you should go off of. That's a better way of saying it, because you're right. A lot of times you have these anxieties associated with it, and it can be a struggle in the beginning, but you have to think about the end result. Like, how do you feel after it's done? If you're happy with that, then that's a better read on as to like, is this something to continue?
Yeah. And I think initially it may not be your thing. A lot of people maybe don't quite get their stride with jiu-jitsu initially. Like it's kind of hard for them to catch on, or they're getting kind of beat up a little bit, or they're finding it hard to stay consistent. But eventually there's a little hump you get over. And once you get over that little hump where you start you hit a technique, you hit a sweep, you hit a submission, you get that little bit of the little taste of, oh, that was fun. That was cool. That worked. Then that's the thing for me, with jiu-jitsu, the addicting part was learning a technique and then implementing it and seeing it work. That was like, holy crap. Cause it's not just theory anymore. It's like I actually do it, like with karate or whatever, or taekwondo. It's like, well, you're going to do this and you're going to chop this way and do that, but you never really put it into, and then in the back of your head, you're always like, is this really going to work? Will this really work against a resisting opponent? That was for me always like, like with getting off topic as well, look at these self-defense techniques, right? Like this gun disarm or whatever, like, oh shit, but would this work? Or I don't know. And it can get a little tricky there, and you just never know. But with jiu-jitsu, the addicting part for me, and the really, really interesting part was actually putting the techniques into use and seeing them work. And even having them done to you. Like you'll show us technique and then you'll do it. You'll do the move of the day, and you kind of, every time somebody gets hit with the move of the day, you kind of give them the little smirk, you give them the little look, like gotcha. And that's a fun thing too. It's fun to kind of experience that as well.
Yeah. And again, that goes back to not being too hung up on like the end destinations. Cause again, they're typically,
Yeah.
they take a long time. Like you said, jujitsu is like, you know, and maybe that kind of goes to it too. Like when, for instance, when I got into jujitsu, initially, I never really thought about jujitsu being my thing. I just wanted to do it. I just really like doing it. Now, after a couple of years, it started to become my thing because I was getting
Yeah.
really into it and, you know, giving more and more time and effort into it. But I never really went into it with any sort of end goal. I never had a goal with it. Like not in the beginning. I was just like, I'm just training. I don't
Mhm.
care. And like the only goals I might have would be to like, I'm going to try to beat Dan because Dan's kind of good. And so if I beat Dan, that means I'm pretty good at jujitsu and we'll see what happens, you know, and that has its own problems. But you know, I was focused on my rolling and most of the time in my training. But again, I
Yeah.
wasn't focused on black belts or blue belts. I wasn't focused on anything else except for those times where once I got a little bit better and I started being focused on competitions. And I was so worried about chasing gold medals and stuff like that. And again, those created problems because in the moments when I got to the competitions, I was so fixated on the end destinations, which would be the gold medal, me standing up on the top of the podium, that a lot of times I wasn't able to pull the trigger because I was too worried about whether or not this would lead to me making, you know, winning a gold medal or whatever,
Yeah.
opposed to just going after someone in the thick of it, which I've talked about multiple times. But again, it's just an idea, and that idea served me pretty well over the years because as I became a little bit more aware of what I was doing, I mean, because we all do this, you chase these big goals and everything else. And then once you get them, you're like, oh, that's it. Or a lot of times they get in our way at times because we have a big goal in our mind and then we're not living up to that expectation that we set for ourselves, or we see someone else hitting our goal before we hit it. And we're like, oh, look
Yeah.
at Bob over there. Bob's doing it. Why am I not doing it? You know, that sort of thing. We all do that sometimes. It, at least if you recognize it, it allows you one to back off a little bit and sort of make sure it doesn't interrupt training or whatever it is that you're doing too much, but it also allows you to take some of the sting and the depression off of actually accomplishing the thing that you wanted to accomplish. Because if you get it, it's like I've seen people send me messages like, Chewy, like I just won my competition. Why am I so just down in the dumps? I'm in a funk. I'm like, well, it's okay. It's normal, right? It's like
Mhm.
you hit that sometimes. So expect it to come sometimes, and then you just get back onto the wagon. Or if you don't get too focused on the end result anyway, it never really happens because you're like, ah, won another medal, got another belt, hit a new tax bracket,
Yeah.
whatever. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like it's you don't
Yeah.
really think about it that much.
How do you overcome that, do you think? Like, if you maybe talking to a blue belt, we talk about the blue belt blues we've talked about already. What do you tell that blue belt? What do you give them? What piece of advice would you give them to see if maybe they're first very extrinsically motivated on that blue belt, but now they've achieved it, they're in that depression, or they've won that gold medal?
Mhm,
What do you do? Like, how do you get them, or how do you encourage them to kind of get back to what is really important, which is the process,
mhm.
and kind of moving on and keeping up with your training?
Well, first off, like that feeling's important because we a lot of times as humans, like we don't learn a lesson until we've like have some sort of feeling with it. You know, again, like mama says, hey, don't touch the hot stove. Eventually you touch the hot stove and you realize why she told you not to touch it. But until you have that pain associated with it, you don't quite understand it. In jiu-jitsu, you see a lot of young guys who will be told by the old guys to say, hey, man, you might need to take a rest day every now and then. You might need to ease up on your body a little bit, whatever. And the young guy's like, oh, man, whatever. I'm fine. I'm a young body. You're just old and stuff. I know I was that way. And then as I got older, I was like, whoa, like this is what they were talking about. Like I'm banged up. I've got a little arthritis or here or there. My knee's a little stiff today because it's going to rain. Why does that make it? That kind of stuff. And then you understand. And so a lot of times, like we don't understand unless we have something to actually work with, like on a feeling sensation wise. And in my eyes, a lot of times we hear information, and until we've actually have experience with it, we don't have the wisdom from it.
Yeah.
Like, so for instance, this is why, like, with your techniques as an example, you learn a technique and then you might be able to regurgitate all the points that your coach had said. You know what I mean? You might be able to, devour a 16-hour John Danaher DVD and then be able to like say everything that he said verbatim, but it means nothing for your jiu-jitsu if you haven't used it during rolling, right? If you haven't used it during practice, if you haven't drilled that technique to get the actual feeling of those movements, right? You have head knowledge. You don't have body knowledge. Again, the head and the body and the brain and the brain and the body are all connected. But again, there's a difference. Like we can understand something in our head that our body doesn't have the wisdom or the understanding of yet. It's why a lot of times you see a technique and your coach says, all right, anybody have any questions? You're like, nope, no questions. I got this. You go over and do it and you mess that technique up all up, right? Like you can't, you're doing it all wrong, right? Like we've all done this before, and it's because our body has no experience with it yet. Now our head's like, hey, we know how to do this, but really like you have an understanding and sort of a theoretical head thing, but you don't actually have the muscle memory, the muscle connections there. And so I think when it comes down to it, if that happens to someone, like if you're listening to this and this happened to you or does happen to you, then be like, oh, hey, this is what he was talking about. Huh. Okay. Now what you can do is when you chase these big goals, chase after them 100%, go after them with every ounce of energy that you have. Just understand at the end of it, there's nothing magical about it. Like you are going to become, in order to achieve those goals, you are becoming a different person, a better person, a stronger person, a more capable person, a more knowledgeable person, a person with new skills, all these different things, right? All these great things.
Yeah.
In order to make those goals happen, but the magic again is not in the goals. And so if you understand that, then when you hit those goals, you'll be ready to say, okay, what's my next goal? All right, let's go hit that now. And you get back to work and you just do what you're going to do. You know, if it's a big goal, you might celebrate somehow. You know, a lot of times when I hit a big goal of some sort, I will celebrate it. I'll like go out and take my wife out for dinner. I remember one of the first times, you know, I made a sizable chunk of money on the internet, right? Like doing a big launch. I was like, whoa, this is a lot of money. Like, and again, it doesn't have to be money, but that was like a thing for me. I was like, well, I was just trying to, you know, make a little bit of money so that we could like be more financially secure, right? And so I made something, well, that's really neat. And so I was like, well, baby, we're going to go get dinner tonight. Let's go to like a really good restaurant and get some food just to celebrate it. And now tomorrow it's back to work. You know, when I got my black belt, I remember I took a week off. Well, partly because my partner forced me to. I kind of hung out with my girlfriend and we went and did some stuff to kind of celebrate. And then next week, back to training, you know. And so it's just kind of that thing, you know, you just go out. Even when I got my blue belt, what did I do then? I remember like my blue belt was like, me and my buddy was like, whatever, it's a blue belt. But we kind of had our own little celebration for it. And so again, you have a little celebration for your goals, you know, celebrate them, enjoy them for what they are. And then afterwards you go back to work and get back to it, because that's what you have to do. And you don't want to become complacent. You don't want to congeal and coagulate in that little, that area that you're at. You want to keep pushing yourself to improve and to do whatever it is that you want to do. All right, guys. So hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Hopefully you got something useful for it. Again, just an idea that I'm kind of like messing with. I ended up writing out this like long list of, it was just like I think it was on a weekend. I was just kind of like, an idea hit me. So I was like thinking about all these different like lessons from jiu-jitsu and that have, you know, sort of some sort of life application, kind of going back and forth. And I wrote down, I think I got like 70 of them, which is a bunch, but this is one of them. And this is
like a lesson for jiu-jitsu, not a rule for jiu-jitsu.
You can say a rule for jiu-jitsu, lesson for jiu-jitsu, either or, right? It could be a rule for jiu-jitsu. It's like, because it is a rule. Don't chase the end result, right? You're chasing the development you incurred along the way. But it's one of those things where I wrote down a bunch of these, and I was just like, well, you know, just trying to think about lessons from jiu-jitsu that have in turn. And the reason why I was thinking about this, because I was just sort of chewing on the idea that like I grew up on the mats. And so very much of who I am as an adult has been shaped by the fact that I was always training. And it's so hard to sort of disseminate the two. Like I couldn't tell you the life lessons off the mat versus on the mat, because they were all in one. Like any time I had a problem, I was training, and it was a lot of times through training that I dealt with those problems off the mat, right? Or a lot of times, like when I would go into a problem that had nothing to do with jiu-jitsu, right? I would almost look at it like it was a jiu-jitsu problem. You know, if I faced something that was very anxiety ridden or whatever, I'd be like, well, I'm getting ready to compete. That's what I'm getting ready to do. And so what? I do this all the time and I come out on top. And so I would always look at it from that vantage point. So that's one of them. So anyway, just an idea to share with you guys. Hopefully it comes of some use to you. And again, if you guys want to help support the podcast and save some money in the process of getting some cool stuff, check out our sponsors. You can go do so at charlottesweb.com. That's one of our main sponsors. Again, for any of you guys that are interested in using CBD products, but you're worried about pissing hot because you have to take a test, they have a new product that is NSF certified sport, which means that organizations like USADA, which, deal with a lot of different organizations like the UFC. They recognize this particular supplement, which is their Charlotte's Web Daily Sports Edge. They recognize it as being safe for their testing protocols. And so again, that's a pretty big deal because they're pretty stringent with their testing. And so again, do your research, figure out what kind of testing you are being subjected to. And if it matches up, again, that might be a product for you to use, a CBD product, without having to worry about the testing side of it, right? Which a lot of people worry about, because normally the market is so wild and unregulated that nobody does third-party testing. Again, Charlotte's Web, with all their products, not even just that one, have some sort of third-party testing to guarantee what's in that bottle. But that Daily Sports Edge, their new product they just released, which is also endorsed by the Major League Baseball, is NSF certified sport. So check that out. Also check out Matt at Epic Roll. He just released a new wrist lock t-shirt. Again, if you guys checked out any of the shirts that I wore before, there's one that he has a triangle choke. There's one that's the Kimura shirt, and there's one with the wrist lock. Basically, it just says wrist lock in like text, and then it's got a definition of it. And I like it. I think it's fun. I'll wear like the triangle choke shirt or the Kimura shirt, and someone will I'll be out in like the grocery store, and I'll see people like staring at me like what does that say? You know, like what a triangle choke. What is that? You know? And so again, they've got a wrist locker shirt. The only part about the wrist lock shirt that I'm not happy about is that it doesn't say like something about being a dirty wrist locker. It's like the actual definition. I'm like, I would have appreciated. So like, you know, it's what does it say here? It says a wrist lock is a joint lock primarily affecting the wrist joint, or it's a joint lock primarily affecting the wrist joint, and in some cases the radial ulnar joints throughout rotation of the hand. A wrist lock is typically applied by grabbing the opponent's hand, yada yada yada, and you know, something about making you a dirty bastard on the mats or something, you know. But again, you can check out some of his stuff if you want to, guys. Matt's a really cool guy. He's a black belt that makes jiu-jitsu gear for jiu-jitsu practitioners. I'm currently in the process of beginning to work with them to make some new jiu-jitsu rash guards and shorts. Just a heads up. I'll be on the lookout for those in the future. But you can go to his website at epicrollbjj.com, and the promo code is Chewjitsu for 15% off the order. And again, check them out. And guys, if you are a man or you have a man in your life that would love some premier men's grooming products, some premium men's grooming products, not premier, premium, you can go to manscaped.com. Again, at the beginning of the show, I was talking about the fact that, you know, the first product I ever used for Manscaped was their trimmer, their body. Like they say it's a ball trimmer. I just use it for trimming everything from my beard down to my whatever else I trim. And, you know, one of the things that I like about it is that it's cordless, it has a light, and it's waterproof. So I can take it in the shower with me. I can trim up, and I can get all those darn hairs. Again, if you're a guy, you know this. I've seen so many different like gadgets to deal with this problem. One of them, I don't know if you ever saw this. It was like a bib. You would wear this. You know what I'm talking about? You put the.
I had this thing called it was like a beard king or something. You like it suctioned to the mirror and went around your neck.
Yeah, you look like you're wearing a big beard. It's like so silly. It's like you feel like a 2-year-old trying to you know, trim your beard. So now I can just go into the bathtub, and it's cordless and it's water. Now, granted, I'm not always taking a shower necessarily, but I can still step in there and I can trim up, and then I'm done with it. And all the hair is at the bottom, so it's not out on the floor or anything like that. And then I can just scoop it up, throw it in the trash, be done with it. It's very convenient. So again, something to consider. Again, I know that like there's all kinds of reasons, and it's a trimmer or whatever else, but like that's a nice little addition there. But again, if you want to check out the trimmer, it's a nice trimmer, and all of their stuff that I've used so far, from their razors down to their soaps and everything's been great. Everything's been super solid as far as the quality and the how it feels when I'm done using it. And so again, I encourage you guys to check them out if you want to. Their website is manscaped.com, and you can get their products for 20% off and get free shipping with them if you use the promo code Chewjitsu20 for 20% off. Again, that's CHEWJITSU 20 for 20% off and free shipping. And guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, do so by going to our Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. As I said at the beginning of the show, when you guys join, you'll get access to all the exclusive content that's released and has been released for the several years, which again will keep you well entertained and give you some interesting stuff. we also give you 2 free bonuses for joining. One of those free bonuses, again, my favorite one. I have a seminar that I give away, which maybe you're interested in, but the bonus that I think would be of most use to most people that I know in jiu-jitsu is a 20-minute routine that Eugene put together, which basically is for stretching specific jiu-jitsu muscles and strengthening certain areas of the body that are affected by jiu-jitsu. If you guys understand how the body works, whenever you do a task repetitively, this is obviously going to make sense. Your body responds to that stimulus in some way. This is why when you lift weights, your muscles get bigger or stronger. And it's why if you constantly have your shoulders rounded, because in jiu-jitsu, it's a good thing to do to have rounded shoulders at times, then your body will start to force itself into that position because your muscles begin to respond to that. What the problem is that what is advantageous for jiu-jitsu rolling is not advantageous for daily living and posture, right? So your neck and shoulders and back and hips and everything else in the body. And so again, there's all these problems. And then at the same time, when you look at the body, a lot of times the pain that you might experience in one part of the body is not the actual source of the problem. The source of the problem may be somewhere else. Like last night, one of the guys at the gym had a problem. His knee was feeling tight. But then when Eugene was talking to him, it was actually your hip is tight, right? And so you can get this transfer of issues going down or upstream the body depending on what's going on. So I say that with you to tell you that Eugene has a routine. It's 20 minutes long. It's a basic warm up and stretching routine that'll target very specific muscles in the body. And again, it's a free bonus that you get by joining the Patreon. So when you go to the Patreon and join up, you'll get access to that bonus and then you can start using it. So again, check it out at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And guys, last but not least, if you guys want to get my daily email that I send out, you can join the newsletter at jiujitsu.net/join, JOIN. By joining up, you'll get access to 3 free ebooks. One's on drilling, so you can improve your game. One is on designing a game plan, which you can use in the gym, but it's going to be really helpful if you are getting ready for a competition. And there's also one on at-home studying guides. And basically was made during COVID, basically to help people that are not able to train or they're locked down or whatever. It was a nice way to say, hey, here you go, try this out. It'll help you guys study a little bit while you're at home. And so some different ideas on that. So again, you can get that at my website at jiujitsu.net/join. And then once you join, you'll get my daily email newsletter, which you can unsubscribe from at any time. And guys, that's it. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.